Boy, you guys are great. All right. Hey, listen, let's switch on over into some fiction time. And thank you, by the way, everybody who's been watching the former Star Trek Writing Fellow pieces, videos over at YouTube and at Rumble. Please check them out and sign up, follow at Rumble. That's their term. Subscribe at YouTube and spread the videos around. It would be terrific. I hope you're having a great time hearing some of these interesting stories about people like Howard Pyle and his amazing artwork, or what we discussed on Wednesday, the writer Winston Churchill and his connection with Winston S. Churchill, and the fact that he came from New Hampshire, and the book The Crossing, which I've got right over there past the camera. Tonight, for Fiction Friday, we're going to enjoy a short story by a very, very well-respected author and his very, very well-respected author wife. We've got a team up of people who really, they really had a lot of fans during the pulp era and the early, what you call the golden age of sci-fi. And they also wrote horror. So want to tell you about these folks. It's time for us to go into the outer limits, my old time script writing. It's time for Fiction Friday and the control voice from Liberty.
There is nothing wrong with your television set. Do not attempt to adjust the picture. We are controlling transmission. If we wish to make it louder, we will bring up the volume. If we wish to make it softer, we will tune it to a whisper. We will control the horizontal. We will control the vertical. We can roll the image, make it flutter. We can change the focus to a soft blur, or sharpen it to crystal clarity. For the next hour, sit quietly and we will control all that you see and hear. We repeat, there is nothing wrong with your television set. You are about to participate in a great adventure. You are about to experience the awe and mystery which reaches from the inner mind to the outer limits.
All right, Outer Limits at Bridge Studios in Vancouver. It was awesome, and there was an Earl's restaurant within walking distance, and then I could walk home from there. It was great, and there was a used bookstore up on Hastings, and it was fantastic. And they're still open. If you look up Burnaby Hastings used bookstore right across the street from the Safeway, I was in there every Saturday. I got so much great stuff there. I didn't get this there. I want to show you the book called Detour to Otherness, which is a collection of stories by the very well-known Henry Kuttner and his wife, C.L. Moore. Sometimes Henry would be the writer. Sometimes C.L. Moore would be the writer. Sometimes they co-wrote. Two authors in one. So for Fiction Friday on Liberty Conspiracy, and for our new channel, former Star Trek Writing Fellow, science fiction script writing, short stories, prose writing, movies, lots of cool stuff. We're going to get really into it. I hope you'll follow the channels on YouTube and on Rumble and spread the word about what I hope are interesting videos for Booktube. Well, on Wednesday, we talked about June on the Range, brought up the frontier story called The Crossing by Winston Churchill. Great story about that. If you get a chance, check out the video of that. It's our number 6, like the prisoner. And I want to read to you a story, a short story by Henry Kuttner and C.L. Moore, which is a combination of science fiction and some scary stuff. So if we turn to page 102, we will see the story called The Little Things. The Little Things. And here we go. By the way, Henry Kuttner, F. Paul Wilson has an introduction to one of the Henry Kuttner collections. And it was funny because I didn't know F. Paul was a big fan of Henry Kuttner. And then Paul gave me a copy of this book that had just been released, and he had the introduction. I'm like, oh, you like Henry Kuttner? That's cool. So multiple generations are digging Henry Kuttner. So here we go. The Little Things by Henry Kuttner and C.L. Moore. That's CL Moore, Morre, and Henry Kuttner with 2 T's and Henry, of course. Okay, the little things. The first thing he did when he felt free from pursuit was to head for the newsstand. He wanted to know the date. He didn't know how long he'd been in the Chateau d'If. That's D''IF. In the Chateau d'If. Because after the first year or so, there wasn't much point in keeping track. There simply wasn't any way of escaping. Edmond Dantes had got out of the original d'If, but such a trick wouldn't work twice. When the guests died in this particular guest house, there was a quick cremation in the basement somewhere. That was one of the distressing, sparse scraps of information he had managed to pick up during his period of imprisonment. Not once in that long time had he left the windowless single room with its nearly luxurious furnishings and completely luxurious Siamese cat, Sean, who had kept him from utter loneliness. Not once had he left. It had been a wrench to leave Sean, but her devotion was given to things, not people, and it had been no imprisonment for her. The miracle that had enabled him to escape was not one that could be extended indefinitely. He took the chance when it came and got out while the after rumblings of the explosion were still sounding from below. He didn't know what it was, but the science of the big boys who ran the place was slightly super. He got out in a sack that was piled with a dozen others on an elevator platform. And after that, for a while, he depended on his sense of touch and sense of hearing for orientation. He didn't learn much, but he had an idea that the sacks were dealt with by automatic machinery. The helicopter had automatic controls anyway, as he discovered after getting out of the sack. He had a bad moment or two mastering the enormously simplified gadgets. Copters had been mighty complicated in 1945, and he was inclined to make too difficult a job out of it in front of him. The panel exploded into lights and yelps before he actually got to the ground, so that must have been the tip-off. They had been after him, the big boys who'd kept him in DIF for years. Oh, they kept him very comfortably. He was in perfect physical condition. Special lamps and treatments took care of him physically and mentally. A televisor gave him education and entertainment. There were books. But he never saw or read anything released later than June 1945. Maybe that was why worry hadn't eaten into his brain and nerves. He didn't feel quite so much left out of things. He knew, of course, that the world was moving on, but he didn't see it move. That helped. The copter grounded in a plowed field. It was night, but there was a full moon. Silhouettes against a dim glow told him that there was a city not far away. The airship shot up and went away. It had no lights and was swiftly lost as it kept going up, apparently heading for the stratosphere. He took several deep breaths. Then he felt non-existent eyes on him. The skin of his back contracted, and he knew that he was a fugitive. It was different, but it wasn't so different. The basics were still there. There were people, and the styles and clothing hadn't changed too much. He wore a duplicate of the same suit he'd had on in 1945, that June day, when they'd come for him, when the big boys had come for him. The big boys who'd sat outside and waited, their faces hidden, while their strong-arm men appropriated Tenning. I am Dave Tenning, he thought, and there was a little shock of novelty. He had got out of the habit of thinking of himself in any personal sense. In fact, the calm, confident realization of personal identity had gradually vanished during the term of his imprisonment. Like a baby, he had become almost unconscious of ego. There had been no need for its assertion. I am Dave Tenning, but there is another Dave Tenning. That was where reality left off and terror began. It had never seemed quite real until now. The knowledge that an alter ego was walking in the outside world, because there hadn't been any outside world, really, after a while. It moved away from him in time, and the people in it, even those he had known intimately, were less real than the sensuous detachment of the Siamese Shan. His clothes were all right. Nobody stared at him. He hadn't any money, of course, and that was a handicap, but not an insurmountable one. The boys at the Star would stake him. But he must be careful not, well, we got a links over here, to encounter the pseudo Dave Tenning until he was ready. Maybe he'd need a gun. These doppelgangers could be killed. They always died when their originals did. That was why the originals were kept alive and in good physical and mental shape. There was some vital bond, something psychic, a dynamo of life force in the original that kept the carbon copy going by induction. He'd theorized in that direction anyhow, and it seemed to check pretty well. But he felt funny, because this wasn't his world anymore. He kept thinking that the men and women who passed him would stop and glance, and then there'd be an outcry. Just what, he didn't know, except that he didn't belong here. In 1945, he had belonged, all right. He knew why they had snatched him, too. A gossip columnist has potentialities of power. They wanted men, doppelgangers, in key places. They had a lot of them, undoubtedly. 1945 had been a crucial year. It was one of the few times when Pandora's box had been opened, when too much was available to a wide-eyed civilization. Germany was on her knees, Japan going down, and the post-war world had been a bogey. Not because there was so much to do, but because there were so many, very many ways of doing things. It wasn't Pandora's box, it was more of a grab bag. The social problems were far tougher than technological problems because the human basics remained unaltered, and people don't change as fast as the things change. He could have planned on a dehydrated chicken in every pot, but the change over the conversion of the social setup, this change was another matter and very wide. It didn't look as though much had changed, actually. Not really. He even recognized places. There were some new buildings, though not many. The automobiles had a different design without streamlining, and they were more pleasing to the eye. Buses without drivers moved close to the curb and stopped at intervals. The lampposts gave a different sort of light. Shop windows showed clothes, sporting goods, liquors, toys. Nothing radically different. But it was the small changes that made the city alien to Tenning. He didn't belong. Also, he knew that somewhere was another Dave Tenning who had supplanted him, and that realization partially erased his consciousness of his own ego. He had a momentary, unlikely sense of guilt, as though he had interfered with the rightness of the plan by escaping from the if. You're a stranger, the people said as they went by, without actually looking at him. You're a stranger. Stranger, hardly. I lived 8 years in this town. I came here from New York, a rag, and people read my columns. So maybe it wasn't Winchell or Pyle or Dan Walker. I never pretended to be anything more than a second-string columnist. I was read at breakfast over the coffee, and people got a bang out of the muck that I raked. I'm Dave Tenning, and for years or centuries, I've been locked up in a comfortable little prison with a Shangri-La library and a cat named Sean, who didn't give a hoot about anything except a cat named Sean. The ghost walks. The ghost does walk. Just where he's bound, I don't know, but he's looking for some threads to pick up. Looking for the date, for example. The newsstand had regular papers, and it also had small, thick discs of plastic or glazed cardboard. Tenning stopped to stare. The date. Fish, December 7. And so, what? Paper, mister? The man at the booth said. Sheet or roto? Look, Tenning said. What's the date? December. He wanted to ask another question, but he didn't. He turned and went on, wondering about 7. Year 7? Not Anno Domini? So, the little things, like this, would be the hardest to pick up. People don't change, they just grow older. But fads and gadgets and trivia, they alter fast, even to the point of becoming unrecognizable. And he still didn't know what year it was. Heck with that. This was Gardner Street. And he knew where the Star Building was. He hopped one of the robot buses when it stopped, and he wanted a cigarette. He was inactive for the first time since his escape, but his nerves weren't inactive. But nobody on the bus was smoking. He hadn't seen anyone smoking. The Star Building was still there, big, old, and surprisingly dark. The electric banner on the roof was gone. Tenning walked up the steps and rattled the ancient doors. They were locked. He stood, hesitating. This time, he was scared. A chased fox goes to earth, but if he finds his burrow blocked up, that's not good. Tenning automatically reached into his pockets, one after another, and they were all empty. A heavy-set man strolling along the street paused to look up at him. Diamond points of light showed under overhanging brows. That place closes at tilt, the man said. Tenning glanced back at the locked doors. What? Tilt? It does? Government offices, the man said, shrugging. They run by a schedule. No use trying to get in. Not till Fen in the morning, anyway. Tenning came down the steps. I thought this was the Star Building. No, the assured, quiet voice said. Not anymore. We thought you'd come here, though. Tenning's poised, singing nerves went wham. His fist made a similar sound as it hit the man's jaw, and Tenning followed up that with a good blow and several others. He struck with panic and hysteria. The sound of alarmed voices made him realize that his opponent was down and that figures were closing in. He knew the streets and alleys and got away easily. That relieved him a bit. His pursuers were simply casuals. If they'd been men from D'If, he wouldn't have escaped without a lot more trouble. So they knew, and they were on his track. Fine. He wanted a gun. He wanted a big bludgeon with spikes in it. He wanted poison gas and blockbusters and flamethrowers. Most of all, he wanted a hideout. It was the familiarity of the city that actually was dangerous. The little things were different, and they were the ones that could betray him. He might find himself taking too much for granted because this alley was in looking just like the Poplar Way he used to know. And as he walked along, a paving stone might suddenly fly away with him and take him back to If and that cat. He went down to Skid Row, and that hadn't changed. The people had. He didn't know any of them. Maybe in a different social setup, different people would be hanging on the ropes. But was this another setup? Was this a setup to get him? There was a cheesy sort of beer garden out in back, and he went there and wondered about things. Customers were paying for their drinks with tokens of some sort. Under a bedraggled potted tree, a girl was sitting alone at a table, nursing a highball. They looked at each other. The waiter appeared, and Tenning hastily got up and went to the telephone booth. But it held gadgets that were different, and there was no directory. So he came out again and stood helplessly, hesitating. He went over to the girl. She looked lost as well. "Look," Tenning said, "can I sit down?" "Never works out," she said. "I can't keep up with it. You're not the man, you know." She was drunk, plenty drunk, but she held it well and managed to still look pretty. "Sit down," she said after a while. "Are you lost too?" "Yeah, lost and broke. I want a nickel to make a phone call." Her blue eyes went wide. She laughed, but not pleasantly. And she called the waiter. "2 highballs." Tenning waited. The drink, it tasted good, but it lacked schmaltz, non-intoxicating alcohol, he theorized. "What about it?" he asked. "Thanks for the drink, but what I really want—" "You can't make a call that far back," she said. And Tenning's spine jammed itself together and felt cold. His fingers tightened on the glass. He said gently, "What do you mean?" "I miss it too. I grew up in the wrong time. Some people just can't adjust. We're a couple of them. I'm Mary. You?" "Dave," he said, waiting for a reaction. But there was none. She didn't know then. How could she? The whole world wasn't spying on him. The whole world wasn't in league with the If. That cat strolling across the bricks wasn't really in telepathic touch with Sean, reporting the whereabouts of the escaped prisoner out here. "Why can't you make a phone call?" he asked. "It wouldn't be worth it. Building phones just for people like us. We'll die, Dave. We can't propagate. They don't try to harm us because we're not in the way. If you don't fit in, okay, get drunk and think about Andy. You don't know Andy." "Who?" She laughed. "Oh, he died, and I didn't." Or vice versa. "I've never seen you around here before." "I've been out of town for a long time." "I never bothered to go." "Look, the telephone. You know how they work nowadays," she said, "and what they call them." Tenning was looking at a clock high on the wall. He couldn't make much of those numerals. They weren't numerals. They were arbitrary signs. "Sela plus," Mary said. "So we've plenty of time. Andy won't come. I told you he was dead." Little things are important. They make up their own dates, their own hour names. And why? So people would be just a bit unsure, perhaps, or maybe because time names were a common denominator, and by changing those, the people were gradually turning onto a different path. There would be no sudden, tremendous metamorphosis. Tall cities would not spring skyward overnight. Ships would not fly to the planets, because people change more slowly than that. Chaos and revolution follow renaissance if the people have power. In 1945, there had been power to waste. There had been 100 plans for rebuilding a new world, and each had its own backers, many of them fanatical. Harding was elected because he promised normalcy. After war, men were tired. They wanted to crawl back into a 1912 womb. They didn't want experiments that might upset their lives further. Even before Japan went down, the road to the future was clear. 100 plans and 100 fanatics and weapons of power. If one plan had been chosen, there would have been opposition and deadly danger to civilization. Because by 1945, technology had developed weapons that were too perilous to be used, except by fanatics. At one point, everyone agreed. The Harding Platform. Pre-war security. The good old days of life. It was easy to turn propaganda in that direction. Men wanted to rest. So they rested. And utopia did not come. But there were signs. Streamlining was not functional for surface vehicles. It wasn't used. Alcoholic drinks were, after a while, intoxicating, but without toxic effects. Fish Decem 7, Sela Plus. But in the open, nothing. People were contented and secure. They had their old cafe, safe. They had their safe way of life. Perhaps subconsciously they were being conditioned otherwise. They took it for granted now that this was Fish Decem 7. A few misfits who couldn't get used to the psych phones. He had been a reporter, so he picked the scoop out of Mary after a while. It took quite a few drinks, and he had to keep turning the subject away from Andy, who was dead, but who used to do a lot of things in the old days when telephones were still used. People are different, Mary said. It's like, I don't know, they've got something on their minds, but I don't know what it is. I remember in school, everybody was tremendously excited one time about beating Tech High in the big game. I didn't care, but everybody else did. There was a sort of undercurrent. They were all working for that deep inside of them, and I couldn't see it. Suppose we didn't win. What about it? Antisocial, Tenning said. There's something in the air now. Everybody's working to beat Tech High, except me and, she made a gesture, people like us. We're not even in the way. I used to work on the Star, he said. It moved, didn't it? All the papers moved, of course. They're published from somewhere, only nobody knows where. Do you read the Star? I don't want to read anything. I was thinking about a columnist named Tenning. She shrugged. I know about him. He isn't with the Star now. He spotcasts. That's radio? Not anymore. Tenning's a hotshot now, Dave. Everybody listens to him. What does he talk about? Gossip and politics. People listen. Yeah, people listen to the dirty ringer, and he molds public opinion. He molds it the way the big boys want. That's why they grabbed me in 1945. I wasn't at the top then, but I had the public ear. I was getting good audience reactions. Spotting key men to work their plan for them was something they did. Ringers, doppelgangers, in the right places. painless psychology, sugar-coated propaganda, and a world moving, leaving Dave Tenning behind. A simply immense sphere beginning to turn from its course, gathering momentum as 1,000 doppelgangers pushed it along. Okay, maybe the plan itself was a good plan, but Dave Tenning had been the prisoner of this for a long time. I've got friends, or I used to have them, he said. Mary, how can I get in touch with a guy named Pelham? I don't know. Royce Pelham. He used to publish The Star. Have another drink. Look, this is important. She stood up. Okay, Dave, I'll fix it. And she went to the psych phone booth. Tenning sat and waited. It was a warm night. His glass, cooled by induction, felt pleasant in his palm. A Skid Row beer garden, smelly, not too clean, with moribund potted trees looking dissipated in the moonlight. Welcome home, Dave Tenning. Welcome back to life. No brass band, but so what? The brass band is out serenading Dave Tenning too, the pseudo-man who made good. Offbeat music will swing crazy boogie rhythms somewhere, hitting the blue chord hard. Mary reappeared, looking pale. I kept thinking of Andy, she said. Before he died, he got to liking those psych phones. I never can get to it. After 1945, people really want old-style life? Did they? Or was the social growth, the evolutionary trend, still stirring? The superficialities, were they gone, or would they come back? People seemed to like new things if they weren't too new, and they didn't seem to point the way to change with a capital C. Before a baby can run, it must be taught to walk, its fears overcome. Pelham, Tenning said. Wheeler T. Carib Street. Okay, how do I get there? She told him. She looked baffled. Oh no, she told him, and he felt baffled. Mary finished her drink. Oh, I'll show you. It's something to do, but we'll come back here later. They caught a bus. No fares were collected, and finally got to a comfortable old-fashioned house in the suburbs. Mary said she'd wait in the corner drugstore and drink a change. A change. Tenning was wondering about the color of a change as he rang the bell. Old Pelham himself opened the door. He was smaller, a trifle shrunken, and completely bald now. His heavy face, seamed with folds, was inquiring. So? Royce, you know me, don't you? No, Royce Pelham said. Should I? I don't know how long it's been, but Tenning, Dave Tenning, The Star, 1945. A friend of Tenning? Pelham asked. I've got to talk to you. If I can explain. All right, come in. I'm alone tonight. The kids are out. Now. So they sat in a comfortable room with furniture that was mostly old, but had a few new and disquieting things, like the shining, moving, singing crystal on its pedestal in a corner. Pelham was courteous. He sat and listened. Tenning told it all, what he'd experienced, what he'd been doped about, what he'd forgotten or tried to remember. The whole works. But you're not Tenning, Pelham said. I told you, he's a double. You don't look like Tenning. I'm older. You never were Tenning, Pelham said and gestured. Part of the wall turned into a mirror. Tenning turned and looked at a man who wasn't Tenning and who had never been Tenning. They'd done that in DIF. There'd been no mirrors there. Only Shan could have told the truth, and Shan couldn't be bothered. 5 years, 10 years, 20 couldn't have made this type of difference. The bone structure was different. He was older, but he wasn't an older Dave Tenning. Somebody else had grown older in DIF. Fingerprints, Tenning said, quite a while later. He said it twice before his voice was right again. Prints, Royce. They couldn't have changed those. But then he looked at his hands. He knew what his fingerprints should look like. Those whorls and spirals had been somewhat unusual. I think, Pelham began. Never mind. They didn't forget anything. But my mind's still mine. I can remember the days on the old star. He paused. The doppelganger would remember too. The doppelganger was a perfect double of the 1945 Dave Tenning, complete with memories and everything else. Enoch Arden, a stranger and afraid, in a world I never made. There must be some way of proving. I'm an open-minded man, Pelham said, but Lord, I've known Tenning for years. I had lunch with him last question in Washington. You simply can't expect to get away with whatever it is you're trying to get away with. Maybe not, Tenning said. So they'll catch up with me eventually and take me back to my cozy little apartment in whatever it is. Oops. Pelling spread his hands. All right, Tenning said. Thanks for something anyway. I'll let myself out. He did. Mary was drinking her orange-colored change at the counter when Tenning entered the drugstore. He perched on the stool beside her. Okay? She asked. Just fine, he said bitterly. Got any plans? Not yet, but I will have. Come along with me, she ordered. It's my turn now. There's something I want to see. He went with her downtown to a central plaza he remembered. They stood near the sidewalk opposite the marquee of a hotel, and in the warm, prescient night, the pulse of new life beat dimly in offbeat rhythm. People were different, Tenning saw. It was nothing tangible. They had just grown older, but not as he had grown, not as even Mary had grown. They were conditioned they were offbeat. But every face held a latent consciousness of security. There would be no revolutions here. The roots were firm in old things, and the new things were coming gradually, inevitably from them. Blast, Tenning said. What? It was all wrong. He could have adjusted easily to a completely new world. A civilization 1,000 years hence would have been all new. That would have been acceptable. But by Fish Decem 7, only the little things had changed. The little things. And the minds of men. A man came out of the hotel and got into a car that pulled up. He was quite an ordinary man, but Mary's fingers clenched on Tenning's arm as the vehicle swung out and disappeared along the street. Eh? That was Andy, she said. He didn't get it for a moment. Then he thought, so it wasn't Andy who died. It was Mary. Or rather, she stopped living. She stuck to the telephones when Andy started to get used to the psych phones. She was a casualty as well. Let's go back to the beer garden, Tenning said. Gladly. Come on. It didn't take long, but there was somebody waiting at their table. The heavy-browed man Tenning had encountered on the steps of the Star Building. He had a purple welt on his jaw. Tenning's insides coalesced coldly. He poised, hesitating, and then glanced around quickly. I'm all alone, the man said. Look, don't start anything. I forgot to give you this. He slapped a leatheroid folder on the table. You're not taking me back, Tenning said. Unconsciously, he had gone into a crouch, Mary behind him, instinct flooding his bloodstream with violence. No. You left a week or two too soon, but it doesn't matter. Good luck. The man smiled, got up, and went out, leaving Tenning helplessly shaken. Mary opened the folder. A friend of yours? No. He must be, to leave you this. What is it? Tenning still looked after the heavy brown man, receding. Token currency, she said, and plenty of it. You can buy me a drink now. He snatched the folder. Money? That's what... Heck. I can't fight them now. I can splash the truth. I can fight them now. Sorry. Money? That's what... Heck, I can fight them now. I can splash the truth all over the country. See if I don't... Sean purred on the lap of the red-haired man. Tenning is the only one who's escaped so far, Jerry, the man said, gently tickling the cat's jaw. And that wouldn't have happened if we hadn't been reconverting. Doesn't matter, anyhow, of course. He was due for a discharge in a week or so. You might look over his records someday when you have time. Tenning's an interesting non-entity of the more troublesome sort. There's a lot I'm still vague about, the other man said. My background's geopolitical. I'm not a physicist. The doppelgangers. That's a matter for the technicians. You're especially qualified for administrative work with psychological angles. Right now, you're getting a bird's eye view of the whole works, a sort of apprenticeship. The doppelgangers, though, well, the double concept's interesting. Not terribly important, but interesting. When the double first goes out, the psychic cord between the two is very strong. That's why we have to keep the original in custody, among other reasons. After a certain period, the double seems to acquire enough personality of his own to go on alone, and the original is released. He's harmless by then, anyhow. He wouldn't have been at first? Oh, no, not Tenning's type. He's one of the dangerous group, not creative, but influential. You see, the creators and the technicians were with us from the start. They saw this was the only possible safe solution. But the Tennings, the fellows with a little talent and a lot of aggressiveness, imagine what damage he might have done in 1945, yopping his emotional reactions over the air, undisciplined, immature emotions, veering in all directions. It's normal, of course. Everybody was veering in 1945. That was what we had to put a stop to before chaos set in. Tenning was one of the unfortunate in-betweens, guys with too much influence to run around free and too little intelligence to come in constructively and work with us. We couldn't reason with his kind. We couldn't even tell him the truth. Tenning duplicate has done a lot of good. Under control. All our key men have done a lot of good. We need guys like Tenning to steer people in the right direction. Under control, Jerry said. The red-haired man laughed. We're not the bosses. Don't start out with the idea even in the back of your mind, Jerry. People with dictator impulses are reconditioned fast. Here's the answer. We could never be bosses in this setup, even if we wanted to be. The change is taking place too slowly. That was our whole concept, of course, and the very slowness of the thing is the check and balance system that works on us. The minute any of us got dictatorship impulses, we'd have to change the social setup entirely. And the people won't accept quick change. They've had enough of that. There'd be chaos, and one lone dictator wouldn't stand a chance. He'd have too many opponents. All we're working for, and don't you forget it, Jerry, is to focus the veering. That job's enough for any organization right now. What about Tenning? Now that he's free, he's harmless? Perfectly harmless. Melhorn gave him token money enough to cover the transition period, and he'll adjust like everyone else, if he can. Pretty hard on him, isn't it? Tossed out into a strange world. It's not that strange. He'll learn. That is, he'll learn now, if he ever would have. I'm not so sure. Some just don't adjust. It takes a certain flexibility and self-confidence to be able to make changes as your environment changes. People like Tinning, I don't know. It's a funny thing, Jerry. There's a whole new class sinking to the bottom of the social setup now. People who can't or won't adapt to the new things. It happens after every major social upheaval, of course, but this time we're getting a new group of misfits. In the long run, a much higher percentage of benefits, of course. It's too bad about the maladjusted group, but there isn't much we can do. I don't know about Tinning. We'll keep an eye on him. We'll help if we can. But these men with half a talent and a taste for public adulation have got a bad, weak spot to begin with. I hope he makes out all right. I hope he does. I don't get it, Dave, Mary said. Whom do you want to fight? He gripped the leatheroid folder savagely. The big boys, the ones who built the psych phones and started this screwy system of Fish December 7th. All this stuff. You ought to know. But what do you want? She asked. What do you think you're fighting for? He looked at her, and in the warm dimness of the air, the wave of the future stirred as an alien quickening that he sensed very dimly and that he hated. I'll fight, he promised. I'll stop this. He swung around and went out. The waiter paused at Mary's table. Highball, she said. He sent a questioning glance after Tinning. One? Just one. He isn't coming back? She didn't answer for a moment as she listened to the offbeat rhythm of the music that had gone on behind her. Not tonight, she said, but he'll be back. There's nothing out there for him. Not anymore. Sure, he'll be back. Someday. And that is The Little Things by Henry Kuttner and C.L. Moore. As you can tell, Henry Kuttner was kind of pro-freedom and gave us a little slice of social manipulation in the world. Slow but sure. Maybe he was even a conspiracy theorist. Who knows? Henry Kuttner, Kuttner. F. Paul Wilson really liked him. F. Paul, fellow liberty-minded guy. Interesting little story. That'll be really good for a Twilight Zone. That'd be a good one. Okay, now we're going to hop over into Rumble Chat, say hi to everybody, and Umbra Syntax says, fascinating piece of fiction there. Yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. It's the little things in life. Yeah, that's pretty wild. Especially, it's interesting, especially when you think about guys like that go off maybe to World War II, they come back, life isn't exactly the same. So you maybe translate it to a guy who's put in prison, gets released. A lot of these guys can't deal with prison life after they get out, that sort of stuff, sort of translates to that. Sorry for a couple of the flub ups there. I apologize about that. One of them was sort of at a crucial time. Every once in a while you're reading it like, oh no, that was at the bad time. Hopefully it was a good story though. And now I want to offer you the latest on Tower, the story I've been working on about the man and the woman working in Vermont as the forestry people in the 1960. And they have to go take care of that fire tower in mid to late November, close it up. It was on a hill in a town called Frenton that many years before was taken through eminent domain by the state and flooded to make a reservoir. Now the hill is an island way in the middle of this big, big lake. It's surrounded by miles of forest. Nearest town is way far away. So they're there, and they're there to close up this fire tower, make sure nobody's gone there. They discover that somebody has broken in and written some weird writing on one of the walls. And the canoe that they brought over, gets blown away with a snow squall, and it's way out in the middle. They can't get at it. And the guy tries to, and he gets hypothermia. She has to go out and rescue him. So they spend the night sort of huddled together, damp. He's got some snacks in his backpack, but they realize that nobody's going to be coming for them, at least for a few days, because when she got the Jeep to get out there to do this last thing, she didn't sign it out, and this check isn't on the schedule. And so they can't really start a good fire. They got a little fireplace thing they sort of made near a broken window. They made like a flue out of some filing cabinets and stuff. And so they're going to try to figure out what to do now. They know they're going to be there for a few days. He acknowledges that he was in Korea and didn't exactly have the best time, got cut by maybe a little kid who discovered that he was part of this group that was going into Korea as part of an intelligence operation years before. And the CIA guy who was leading them, killed the kid after he killed the dog for no reason in the middle of the night. So he sort of brings that memory back as they're there having some food and the fire and stuff, and it's getting to midday. So this is where we come in. And here it is. He seemed to relive it, talking about Korea, moving his arm in an upward swinging motion. He's talking about the CIA guy who was enticing this dog over with bits of jerky or something. He says, and it comes closer. With each toss, he gets it to move closer, thinking it's got a friend. And then he shook his head. This is the guy, Paul, is the character. Damn. For a moment, a fleeting couple of breaths, the atmosphere of that time and place seemed to surround them. She could hear the buzz of the insects and feel the humid air, see the bright, wondering eyes of the little animal as it approached its new friends, curious, tempted by the food. I don't know why I didn't stop him, Paul said. Did he kill the dog? Her name is Caroline. He nodded, stabbed him in the neck. And when one of the guys asked him what the hell he was doing, he said it was to keep things secure and silent. But the dog was fine, and killing it opened the door to the worst part. Caroline watched him, feeling her eyebrows knit. The little boy. Seeming to search her eyes for a sign to continue, or perhaps for permission to stop, Paul hesitated, waited, but Caroline stayed neutral, and he once more peered down, taking a long, hard look at the equally impassive metal floor. I think that's all I'll say. Other than this, that boy fought like a tiger. He was righteous. He was right. He had a hatchet, and in the short time he had at us, he gave me a taste of what I deserved. Did you? No. That was our dog-loving leader. He liked to extinguish futures. Then Paul went silent. Caroline chewed a few more nuts, and when he seemed to reach some solemn point in his contemplation, he nodded at the can. I think I'll have a few of those now. There's a little time break. The spare repast ended far too soon, and Paul replaced the lid, then extracted the other snacks from his pack, lining them up side by side on the floor as Caroline slid more flammable material into the fire. In this island, there's just scrubby bush, and it's all got snow on it. It's wet, so they don't have much to burn. It's not a lot, he commented, laying down one more Hershey's bar, like a punctuation mark to a sentence composed of nuts, a small box of raisins, a pack of mint chewing gum, an apple, and a row of saltine crackers and paper. What normally would last a day likely would have to hold them for 3. Too bad we can't catch a fish or two, she said. Paul raised his eyebrows and tilted his head. You know, That's not a bad idea. There could be some tasty treats around these rocks. Yeah, but I doubt they'd want what we have to offer. We'd have to dig for worms. He thumbed towards the window. Actually, that's something I do know about. We're on the edge of winter, but it might not be too cold yet to get them. Night crawlers migrate deeper into the soil as the temperature drops. They stay below the frost line, often 2 or 4 feet. They enter a state of diapause, making them go still and kind of hard to find, even if you could dig through frozen soil. But we haven't had any period of deep freeze, of course. If we had, we could just walk back over the ice. He drew up his knees and rested his forearms on them, letting the firelight play across his grizzled face. The trick here is finding the right soil. Too many rocks? Yeah, they like rich soil. They're most active just after a rain. In sandy or compacted ground, you might not find any at all, maybe 3 worms per square foot. And here, it's mostly rocks. We could dig around in the moss near the landing area, and there might be something. It's worth a try, if just to kill time and work on making hooks and some kind of line. Caroline scanned the mostly bare room. There were the paper clips, but those might be too weak to use as hooks, and they could use shoelaces for line. Then her walk around the perimeter flowed back into her mind. Hold on, she said. How about the barbed wire? That idea proved difficult to execute. They ate a few more morsels and let the fire work on his clothes. Then he got back into his button-down shirt, socks, and boots. And they took 2 coffee mugs and they headed outside. The air had gone still, expressing a cold, breathless, bitter antagonism. The entire forest, the lake, and cloudy sky disliked what they beheld on the tiny island. But the 2 interlopers moved onto the snow-covered rocks, towards the barbed wire gate and towards the mossy landing just beyond, and stopped at the rows of fencing. Paul studied a line, pinching it in his fingers, and crouched to get it on eye level. There's surface rust, but it's pretty solid. It might prove hard to cut. They stood on a portion of the lowest wire to disconnect it from the posts. Then Paul set about rubbing its corded double strands against the edge of a jagged stone. Over and over, he scraped the rusty wires as Caroline applied pressure to keep the line segment near the ground. When he finally broke through, he got up and walked a few strides, then searched the ground for another jagged stone against which he could rub the wire. He seemed unable to spot anything adequate for the job. Then he blinked and got to one knee. Caroline, did you notice something about these ribbons? They're little black ribbons, plastic ribbons tied in all the barbed wire. Somebody put them there. He drew the line up to show her as she approached. What? These aren't little bows. What do you mean? He blinked, squinted at one in his grasp. I think they're shaped. Whoever put these here, I don't know. He or she made little designs out of them, almost like tiny scorpions. He turned to her as she reached his side. See? And though at first she did not at all see what he did, on closer scrutiny, she knew he was right. Both loose ends of the bows had been twisted and curved slightly inward, while the little loop had been pinched at its farthest curve, making it rise, almost like a stinger. What the hell? The ribbon twitched above his fingertip, vibrating from the subtle movement of the wire. How many of these things are there? Caroline asked, sliding her gaze along the parallel lines. Damned if I know. He shook his head and let it go, wiping away some of the stark white snowpack to expose the wet rocks beneath. But for a moment, his hands stopped, and he stared at the stones and the slush. You okay, Paul? He blinked, glanced at her in a kind of distracted, nervous way, and continued his movements as if all was well. Yeah, just a little disoriented for a sec. Hoping my body will be back to 100% soon. It took more than 20 minutes for him to scrape and bend, rebend, and scrape again the stubborn wire in order to break away a section that was about 15 feet in length. And while he labored to free the line and all its ready-made barbs, Caroline uncovered the moss at the landing point and successfully revealed and caught 5 worms. Dropping them into one of the coffee mugs and stacking the other mug on top, she looked up. He came to her, holding the wire in a giant loop away from his body and up off the ground. And he shook his head. I don't think this is going to work. Don't be so negative. Besides, we have nothing better to do. And that truth seemed to comfort Paul, who smiled, but again pursed his brow at the little ribbons as he settled down on his knees beside her. To her surprise, the idea of the jerry-rigged fishing line worked. It took hours and multiple tries. It took numerous tests and failures and a lot more worms. But after getting over the initial revulsion of piercing, desperate night crawlers on the sharp spikes, and after learning that they had to yank up that line at the first twitch, potentially losing bait for the sake of a catch, they had 2 small sunfish laid on the moss. And they had water and rocks and jagged enough surfaces to scale and clean the little creatures. What they did not have was a great deal of remaining daylight. And so, at what might have been 4 p.m., they packed the prizes in snow and carried them upstairs to boil or broil the bits of meat and bones over their tiny fire. And that is what I've got so far on Tower as they try to survive. So, we'll see. They don't have to do it, but they're trying. They're trying. And that is something that we'll see develop as the days go along. The question is the trouble going to come on the island or from someplace else? Is it going to come from one of them or from something else? You tell me. All right, so let me know if you think that's all believable, if you think that's good. Hopefully that was cool. Hopefully you like the Henry Kuttner C.L. Moore story. Again, that book is Detour to Otherness, and you can definitely check that out. That one, I actually got it used, but it's a beautiful copy. It's like brand new. It's a really wonderful thing. And there they are, the couple right there. Good couple. And they were very, very popular. And just to show you, if you're interested, this one is the one that we discussed Wednesday as the lights flicker and get crazy. The Crossing by Winston Churchill. So you can check out Winston Churchill's stuff. You want a good historical frontier novel. And that'll be good for June on the Frontier. And I hope you like that detour into otherness of science fiction. Meanwhile, the links are not around. But sometime I'll show you one of the pictures I took of the links, and we'll see. I could probably attract them with some TUNA. I can't say the actual word. Shh, quiet. Maybe I'll catch some fish. And I'll get Abe Vigoda to come in. Fish! Or it's like the cat. Fish! From Red Dwarf. What a great show. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you on Monday. I will be, again, here in Russia, in the Russian studio, as opposed to the regular Russian studio, spreading the Russian propaganda for former Star Trek writing fellow, spreading the Russian propaganda for Liberty Conspiracy. And I hope you really had a great time tonight. It was great to talk to Eric Peters of Eric Peters Autos. If you're watching on former Star Trek writing fellow, just check out the Liberty Conspiracy channel on YouTube. Check out my ex at Guard Goldsmith. Go to the Substack and check out ericpetersautos.com. He's a good guy. He's one heck of a good dude. And down the line, eventually we're going to start Liberty Conspiracy Publishing, and we'll have short story collections and artwork and a lot of cool stuff. And maybe Tower will be one of those things that gets released. So I appreciate everyone being there so much. Skunk Hollow, thanks for being there. Steve, hello to you in Maine, my man. I don't know if you're going to make it to Pork Fest, but I'm going to try to go. Charlie Robinson is going to be there. And in fact, Charlie texted me. I got to contact Charlie. We got a new video that he just put out. Yona, thanks for being there. Mark Young, thank you. And Umbra Syntax says, let's see, really enjoying how they are surviving. Yeah, the ribbons tied to the fence intrigue me. Thanks for the update to Tower. Have a splendid weekend. Thanks, man. Yeah, it has been very interesting working around that weird viral exhaustion thing. And again, you hear about these things. And, as I'm talking right now, this is pretty much sort of what I'm normally like. But I still have been very physically messed up. Like even now I'm talking to you, there's some weird things that, everybody deals with weird stuff, but I know there's some unnatural things going on in my body that you just got to fight, So writing the story, again, I've had to make tactical maneuvers to get it done correctly. But luckily with all the writing experience I've had, I've been able to make certain adjustments, which has worked out okay. So I'll be sleeping on the couch here in Russia, Hampshire, and with the links. And I will leave you with a little something. I'm going to leave you with that Outer Limits outro again for former Star Trek writing fellow. And if you're interested in script writing and you're new to that channel, please check it out. I think you'll really enjoy it. Head over to it. There are 6 episodes out there now. One of them I think you'll find really interesting about Howard Pyle. It's funny that he mentioned Howard Pyle and Gardner Street in that. That's, again, very strange. You never know. It's like plate of shrimp from Repo Man. And thanks again. And thanks for being interested in little diversions every once in a while to get the color of life in there. I'll leave you with the Outer Limits intro and the control voice from my days at script writing. Have a great night. God bless everybody.
We now return control of your television set to you until next week at this same time, when the control voice will take you to the Outer Limits.